a privilege to present a towering figure of faith, societal impact, and scholarship. He is a distinguished leader whose life reflects profoundly commitment to service, justice, and peace.
Born in Anshuna, Kaduna State, he embarked on a remarkable academic and spiritual journey, earning degrees in philosophy, theology, peace studies, and a PhD from the prestigious SOAS, University of London.
Ordained as a Catholic priest in 1976, he has since served in various influential roles, from fostering electoral reforms to leading the Oganisha reconciliation process. His dedication to nation building extends to his role as the founder of the Kukah Center, TKC, a Nigerian-based policy research institute. TKC champions political leadership as a collaborative effort integrating diverse governance structures from individuals and small businesses to NGOs and governmental institutions.
Interfaith dialogue is essential to the vision of this highly distinguished individual. Through the Kukah Center, he actively promotes conversations between Nigeria's faith communities and bridges the gap between religious and public policy leaders. His global impact has been recognized with his membership on the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue at the Vatican.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming a leader, teacher, and advocate for positive change, peace, and collaboration, the Bishop, Most Reverend Dr. Matthew Hassan Kukah. You're welcome to Start-Rite Schools, sir.
Ndoma-Egba, you had a wife. She lived with you, now she's gone. Please call her name. You are not impressed by my own rapping. I think you are clapping for this young people when you are rapping. Let me, for very obvious reasons that have been established by General Marwa, stand on existing protocol. You can understand why I should stand on existing protocol. So, one day I got into trouble in a church. You know, these people, when they don't want to make donation, they will say, you donate a widow's mite. And I said, if you donate a widow's mite, you want to be a widower. You know, so make up your mind. And a lot of people felt rattled by that. They say, we're only joking now, Father. We all remember differently. We all remember differently. There was this, start on a light note. There was this Englishman whose wife died somewhere in London and buried her in the cemetery. And then beside her grave was a Chinese man whose wife had also died, and he buried his wife. And next, incidentally, it turned out their wives died the same day. So the Chinese man often would go to the grave of his wife. And according to their Chinese ritual, he would sprinkle rice around. This was the ritual that they had to do. And then, of course, the Englishman would come with his bouquet of flowers, put the flowers, just beautiful like this. And he just remained stuck. How can a man be so stupid as to cook rice and come and throw it away around the grave? So he said one day, he bravely went to the Chinese man and said, why do you waste food? Do you think that your wife is going to wake up and eat this rice? And the Chinese man looked at it and said, well, when your wife wakes up to smell her flowers, my wife will be eating her rice. We all remember those we love differently. Senator Ndoma-Egba, I think all that needs to be said has been said. I'm not unaware of the fact that so much has already been said, and when I was asked to speak on this topic, I wasn't sure what the audience was going to look like, but tried to make sure that we find something that balances everybody. Happily for us, this is a House of Senators. There are two Senate presidents in one place. That is really quite a concentration of risk, but at least one of the senators, insurance will call that concentration of risk. But I think that given the number of people who have turned up here, you can be sure that we are not alone. The topic itself is a bit confusing because how do you create lasting impact in a world that is complex? At least we admit that. I'd like to speak very briefly on general terms in terms of the fact that we all know that the world, everywhere you turn, the world is suffering leadership crisis. And of course, as you saw, and as you've seen across Europe, from Japan to Germany to France to America, elections are delivering unexpected outcomes and everybody is shocked. And the surprises have not gone away. But what I just need to say very briefly is really when we talk about leadership, especially for pretty dysfunctional environments like Africa, where the issues of leadership still remain unresolved, I make the point that very often we confuse leadership with office holding. They're two conceptually different things. We confuse office holders with leaders. It is possible to hold an office and not necessarily be a leader. It's also possible to be a leader and not have an office. Okay, there are people who are governors, there are senators, there are presidents, there are ministers, and so on and so forth. But of course, there are also non-official actors who are also wielding far more influence. So really, leadership is about, can you measure the capacity of the person holding the office to influence citizens? And of course, it's almost like the case of a parent. You ask yourself, you send your child to England, you send your child to Lagos, is there anything you've left with that child? That in the middle of the night, this child will not go to sleep until she has said her prayers because my mommy will not be happy just thinking or knowing that I haven't said my prayers. So essentially, leadership is about office. But of course, when we talk about the environment that we are in, I think there are a few questions we need to ask. And as I said, I don't have the time to go through the things that we need to go through. But Nigerians agonize. If we can only get leadership right. Chima Achebe said, problem with Nigeria fairly and squarely is a problem of leadership. But it was easy to lead. In those days when we had regions and provinces and so on, when we had only few people who had gone to school. Yaya Kwande, Ambassador Yaya Kwande, I read his biography. It was very, very interesting. One of the things he said, which stuck with me, his biography, was that he decided that he and his cousin must go to school. And the one thing they wanted to learn by going to school is how to abuse in English. That was all they wanted to do. So at a time when there were a few people going to school and few people with certificates and few people with university degrees and so on, it was easy to understand. My cousin went to the University of Maiduguri. And in my village, the only university anybody ever heard about was ABU, Zaria. And if my cousin met Yanga when I got a girlfriend, and the girl was not very educated, but she wrote him a letter. He just said, Mr. Philip Jato, ABU Maiduguri. Because that was, for ABU was just another name for university. But when you fast forward now and see how far we have come, that schools are everywhere, universities are everywhere, and that Nigeria has about 274 or so universities across board, then you can appreciate why it is difficult in an environment like this to talk about leadership as if somehow we are all gathering around a man who has all the education. Things have moved on. And as you can hear from the things that these young people are saying, the kind of language, the kind of English, the quality of their presentations, we couldn't talk like this even when we were in our 20s and in our 30s. Many of you here buy all these very expensive phones. I've got my own, it's broken, I don't know how to fix it, I don't know what to do with it. But many of you here, with all your education, with all these wonderful phones, when they get spoiled, you start looking for your 5-year-old daughter to tell you what to do with the phones. So things are changing, and we therefore need to be more modest when we talk about leadership, as if it is, because in the old way, when we talk about leadership, we talk about Namdia Zitwe, we talk about Wolowo, we talk about Sardauna, all these people whose names elicited fear. I remember MD Yusuf of blessed memory, a great man. I met him, he came to London and I was a student then and he took me out to lunch and we were just chatting and I said, how did you end up in the police force? And he said, well, when he was studying in London, he had no intention of going to the police force. But that one day Sadona came to London, and of course all the Arewa children ran to go and see Sadona. They all were sitting there. Who's Kedangidan why? Whose son are you? And when he told them who he was, okay, he was finishing school. Okay, you're finishing school, almost 6 months, come back to Nigeria and join the police. He said, me, studying in London, going back to Nigeria to join police. So of course he had the Sadona very well. And when he now went, he said, can you imagine this old man saying I have to go and do, what am I going to do with police? So his friend said, well, boy, Sadona said, go and join police. You will go and join police because Sadona has said so. But now, Senator David Mark, with all the Senate President of Nigeria, His Excellency the Governor, if you tell your 10-year-old child, it's time to go to bed, he said, now let me finish this script first. It doesn't matter. The questions that, because this is how leadership needs to adjust, that things have changed and things are changing. And therefore, when we talk about leadership, we must be a bit more modest. But of course, more importantly, Africans, there are a few things in Africa that we must shed off if we are to survive. They become embedded in us. That is what we think of women, what we think of children. I was told that when an Igbo woman, she was a professor. Maybe it's not true, but she was a professor. And she gave birth, and her husband had traveled. And they gathered in the house. The people gathered. They had to break kola nut. The husband is not there. This is her first child. So they had to go and open the hand of this boy who is 1 week old. They opened his hand, put kola nut, and say, a man has touched the kola nut. Therefore, we can now break it. So because the mother and the other children, a man has touched the kola nut. The whole question in Africa about what it is to be a man. Because men will say, imagine this woman. Imagine if you are married to a woman who is a professor of political science. Or even if she were governor of the central bank. And they come to your house and men are talking rubbish. And the woman decides to put mouth in a subject she knows very well. When the men leave, what kind of woman you marry? Men were talking, your wife goes for talk. She's a professor of political science. You never go school. You may just be a trader. She's governor of the central bank. But as Africans, how can woman put mouth when men are talking? We have to readjust. Now, different environments call for different perceptions of leadership. And it really depends, because there are many systems of government. You go do political science 101, they will tell you. And you have a choice. Do you want to practice monarchy? In which case, it is only you do blood tests. To be a leader, you do blood tests. So if your father is blood that determines who will succeed his father, not knowledge. Okay? If you run a plutocracy, that is a system of government in which only those with money can participate in government. That is a plutocracy, government for rich people, of course, I'm sure by the time I finish, you will know the one that fits Nigeria. We don't have any system that we have like mixture in a salad plate. Oh my God. So if you can practice feudalism, in which case it's about those with landed property and so on and so forth. Or we can practice kleptocracy, that is government for thieves and by thieves. Ability to steal becomes a determining factor in whether you can participate. Then, of course, you have oligarchy, you have authoritarianism, you've got all kinds of systems, and they survive around the world. But then, Churchill said something. He said, all these systems of government have been tried, they've been tested. But Churchill said that the world has chosen democracy. It's the worst form of government, except for others. That is, other systems have been tried and they've been tested, they've not found to be working. Democracy, with its imperfection, approximates what the society, because it gives people the freedom to be able to make some choices. And of course, when we look around the world, somebody like Mother Teresa, for example, who was one of the most powerful women, she didn't have an office, she was not a prime minister, she was not a president, but whenever she entered the Vatican, the Pope would stand up to greet her. So I'm making the point, therefore, in a roundabout way, to say that when we talk about leadership in the complex world, we have to figure out which kind of leadership are we talking about and for which kind of environment. Now, Nigeria has greatly changed, but many of us are still nostalgic about a Nigeria that has moved on. And we are thinking, okay, the leaders of yesterday, man, I said, imagine those days when we used to be in the university, we are chopping one chicken. Those days, they were, when we graduated, they were telling us, which job are you going to have? We choose from 3 jobs. Now things have changed. And of course, women are very anxious, and parents are anxious because I had to settle a quarrel between a woman and her daughter. And of course, she was shouting. This girl was about 17. She was shouting. When I was your age, Bishop asked her when I was her age. I said, who was I to talk to a man? Who was I? I said, Madam, it wasn't that you couldn't talk to a man. There were no mobile phones in here. Nothing has changed. Opportunities have become available. The world has changed. Expectations are the same. And you better just get used to it. That leadership, as we understand it, has come to an end. If we confuse leadership with people who are holding power. For example, if they tell you now that Joe Biden has malaria, something may happen in the American Stock Exchange, but if they tell you that Mark Zuckerberg has malaria, all right, Mark Zuckerberg is not the president of the United States of America, but if he catches malaria, American stock market will shake. So it's not so much about the offices that we hold. Now, I think that the second point I want to make is that we have made a choice to live with democracy. As it is, we know that our democracy is hardly working, hardly functioning. Although I've made quick to say that we are very impatient with ourselves, very, very impatient. Nigerians are surprised when I tell them that, don't think about tomorrow. We have done pretty well. We are not happy, absolutely, and we will probably never be happy because that's not how the world is. You've got this, you want this. You want this, you get it. We will remain in that way. We are insatiable. That's how we are as human beings. Now, we are not in a perfect place because perfect places don't exist. And we shouldn't be looking for leaders who will take us to a place of perfection because nobody has found that kind of place. However, there are minimum conditions that we require in a leader. And I think we need to use them to measure the whole concept of leadership. Now, what does a leader need to have? One of the most fundamental things that I think is missing in Nigeria is knowledge. I don't want to bore you, but run through and start from the beginning. And you'll hardly find almost everybody who came to power in Nigeria was the result of one accident or the other. Okay? Because if you start, okay, President Tinubu, you prepared for it. We are still stumbling, we're still trying to get off the ground. But he took over from Buhari, who had already given up. Buhari took over from Jonathan, who was thinking he would finish being deputy governor and then go somewhere else. And then something happened. He took over from Yaradua, who had actually said he was going to teach in Ahmadu Bello University as he was finishing his term as governor. Who took over from Obasanjo, who was in prison and not expecting to come out of prison, and somehow he found himself out of prison. Who took over from Abacha, who sadly, even though the 5 political parties have said he will rule forever, fortunately, nature took him. Who took over from Shonekon, who was busy with USC, then they told him to come and be. Who took over from, we can go all the way now. But fundamental to governance is knowledge. Knowledge. You have to have a deep knowledge of the environment that, because if I ask you now, how do you become a minister in Nigeria? Really, those of you who have been, how do you become a minister? You don't become a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I remember just listening to Trump after Trump had won. But in 2 days after Trump won the election, people are already sending their CVs to Washington. Nothing to do. They didn't say that they are members of the Republican Party. No. They are just sending their CVs and saying, I have capacity to serve. They will screen the CVs and decide. In Nigeria, because you don't need to look far to explain why this country is dysfunctional, why we are malfunctioning. The reasons are obvious. How do people become ministers in Nigeria? Nobody looks at it. If you talk about civil, what What are you talking about? Now, if you appear at NNPC with a PhD or in the best university in Nigeria, in the world, for example, Imperial University, where they study oil engineering, they will not give you a job in NNPC. And they will tell you, we know they do paper here now. So if you don't have a basis for team selection, and everything happens purely by accident, and manipulation and machination, then there are consequences. I like football, and I'm happy that at least some civilized person is here holding, yes, you, civilized man supporting Arsenal, a very civilized man. so now, I like football, but my favorite coach still remains Westerhoff. Everybody who has come and gone, I just look there. Westerhoff, there was one interview he granted, and it struck me. He said that one game that Nigeria was playing, I don't remember. It was a game that if we won, we would go to the World Cup. If we lost, we would not go to the World Cup. So Nigeria won quite all right, but the journalist now asked Westerhoff. There were two defenders, I don't remember their name. One was quite good. The second one was next to him. So Westerhoff decided to play this guy who was not that good. So when they asked him, why did you decide to play? This guy is a much better defender. Westerhoff said, no, the defenders were not my problem. My problem was J.J. Okocha. If he starts enjoying the game, he can't obey orders. We can't find him in the field. And he said, this other defender who was a better defender, if I tell him to stand here, if he sees that JJ has moved further, he will move. But this other one that I played, if I tell him to stand here and not move at all, he will stay until the game is over. That means that a leader must understand the psychological state of mind of the people that they are in. That's why we call it assembling a team. And when Nigerians assemble teams based on what witch doctors have said, based on witchcraft, based on what prophets are saying, or based on just that we have connections, it will come with consequences. And the result is why we are still on the tarmac, unable to take off. Now, this word called nepotism. The word called nepotism, what does it mean? Favoring. Do you know who first came up with this idea of nepotism? It's the Catholic Church. Because in the 15th century, what the Catholic Church was doing was popes were favoring their nephews. Okay, and the word nepos in Latin is nephew. And it went on and on and on because they were the closest to them. Until, of course, like everything else in the Catholic Church, we tried. There's nothing we've not tried, but we found it useless. We had the courage to say, no, it can't be like this. So nepotism has become embedded. But of course, it also speaks to the issues that a leader who lacks confidence, a leader who lacks ability, a leader who has enough limited psychological confidence will fall back on the assumption that blood is thicker than water. So the more of my brothers are gathered around me, the more I gather people who pray like me, who talk like me, who work like me, the more the family secrets will be kept. And this is why we are busy keeping family secrets. This is why Nigeria is where it is today. So I also think leaders must have boldness, they must have courage, they must be humane. A leader also has to be sufficiently patriotic. That is, what things are you ready to die for? Because right now, people who call themselves leaders in Nigeria are prepared to protect themselves. And you can see, I'm sorry to say, you can see, because what I'm telling you is not new. The paraphernalia of power, you can see when people who are in power are passing at the risk of all of us. The first armed robber in Nigeria, does anybody remember his name? Oyelusi. You know why Oyelusi became an armed robber? He wore his, what do they call, lace that time, white lace, and was going somewhere to go and chop his ewu and relax. Then somebody came with a car and splashed mud on him. And the man didn't stop. And the guy said, I must drive the car by hook or by crook. That's why he decided that, he'll take it, whether it means using a gun. So the point I'm making is that if you don't have set goals, you will not be able to pick a team that can maximize the plans that you have. And so, to build a complex world, we must also find a way of thinking through very clearly what is the world looking like tomorrow. Because if we become so incestuous that we're only looking inside and look at rewarding party members, and rewarding nephews, and rewarding sons, and rewarding daughters, and rewarding in-laws, and so on and so forth, what will happen is that loyalty will transfer from the nation itself to individuals. Therefore, you find that, I'm sorry, the Nigerian military, the security agencies, they believe that their business is to protect whoever is. So loyalty to an individual is more important than loyalty to a country. And because jobs have been gotten by means that nobody knows, loyalty to our country always becomes very difficult. I don't want to take, because I've got quite a few things I want to say, but I know that there isn't much time. When we think about what tomorrow might look like, we've seen the things that these young people have done. And these schools of this nature are all over Nigeria. Exceptionally brilliant young people that are everywhere, looking for a world and looking for where to succeed. Now, I always tell people, and Your Excellency, please, we've been saying for the last 20-something years, they will gather all of us and tell us, come and see the dividends of democracy, giving you dividends of democracy. My friend Panotomi once said to me, he said, if you hear two Nigerians talking, and one Nigerian said, our governor did 50 kilometers of road in 8 years. Another person said, 50K. You are lucky, oh. Our own started 20 kilometers, didn't finish. So when people talk about the dividends of democracy, they are producing infrastructure, roads, railways, light, and so. But these are not the dividends of democracy. And I will tell you, I'll provoke you. If they were the dividends of if democracy was about infrastructure, we will still be worshiping Hitler today, because the infrastructure that Hitler left in Germany was unrivaled. Apartheid will still be in South Africa today, because what was built in South Africa was built under apartheid. Democracy's benefits are often not necessarily measurable. They are largely intangible. It is understanding how to expand the frontiers of human imagination. So if you have children brilliant, and you constrain their imagination by focusing on a country that rewards based on parent, that rewards based on who your father is, or who your mother is, or what tribe you come from, then it is little wonder that then as now, we're just turning round and round in cycle and going nowhere. Now, of course, it is often impossible to foresee the future. Almost impossible. But if you look at what the Americans did, a young man said he wanted to join the Navy. And his father had died and left him with his uncle. He said, I want to join the Navy, uncle, after I finished secondary school. The uncle said, look, you cannot join Navy. You cannot join Navy because your mother died in a boat accident. Your father died in a well. So anything concerning water, you won't touch it. And the boy said, go and think. I give you 1 week. Go and think about it, but you won't do Navy. So the boy went. After 1 week, he came back. The day he came back, his uncle said, where is uncle? He said, uncle is still sleeping. So he waited. Uncle woke up. As uncle woke up, he said, okay, Andrew, you've decided. He said, yes, sir. What do you want to be? I want to go to the Navy, sir. What, you mean you don't hear what? He said, but uncle, how did your own father, how did grandfather? Said, you are asking about my grandfather died peacefully in his sleep. But uncle, I came and you were sleeping. If your grandfather died in his sleep, why are you sleeping? If you say my father, the point I'm making is to encourage these young people to learn to be rebellious. Rebel against your parents. That is the first thing I would encourage you. Wow. It doesn't matter because, one small boy, I will tell you why I'm encouraging you to rebel. Those rookie go, chairman is here. One small boy went to his father's room and he was playing. And I think threw his shoes on the father's bed. The father came. He pulled him by the ears. What is this? He said, my shoe, Daddy. What have I told you? Putting your shoes on my bed. What have I told you? Have I not warned you? He said that you have warned me, Daddy. Okay. Daddy, I think everybody should just go back to his father's house. Okay? Everybody should go back to his father's house. Daddy knows that the father he left was sleeping on the mat at home. He said, I'll put my shoes on my father's bed. Go and put your shoes on your own father's bed. If your ambition is only to be like your father, no matter what his achievements are, to be like your mother, you must be ready to rebel. Precisely because it is God that puts his plans into you. Your parents are just instruments. So those of you who believe that you are the one to decide what your children are going to be, and many parents are falling victims to this. Career choice. And you can see that some of the best men and women, including these generals here, who would probably tell you their parents didn't allow them to join the army because they would die in war. So the point I'm making is talk to your children, encourage your children, find out, but most importantly, support what plans it is that they have in life. I want to try and find a way of ending. You know, the great Abraham Lincoln, I have a letter here that Abraham Lincoln wrote for his son, to his son's teacher. The day his son went to school, Abraham Lincoln, the American president. And I'll read it because it's important for parents. The young boy sat for examination. When they came out with his own classmate who was from a poor family, he said, oh boy, this exam hard though. And he said, he agreed. He said, but my father is fixing my result. Okay, he said, I know I didn't do well, but my father will fix the result. Many parents are busy fixing results for their children. Okay, you want your children to do well, but when it is time for them to study, you are producing and giving them all kinds of toys as a substitute for parenting. Now listen to what Abraham Lincoln said to his teacher, to his son's teacher. This was the first day the child entered school. President of the United States of America. He said, my son starts school today. It is going to be strange and new to him for a while, and I wish you could treat him gently. It is an adventure that might take him across continents. All adventures that probably include wars, tragedy, and sorrow. To live this life will require faith, love, and courage. So, dear teacher, will you please take him by his hand and teach him things that he will have to know? Teaching him gently if you can. Teach him that for every enemy there is a friend. He will have to know that all men are not just, that all men are not true. That time there was no Beijing, or this was before Abraham Lincoln, a long time ago. So men include women. Please be patient. He will have to know that all men are not just and that all men are not true. But teach him also that for every scoundrel there is a hero. For every crooked politician there is a dedicated leader. And it's a long letter. I wouldn't like to finish it, but let me just end. He says, teach him, if you can, the wonder of books, but also give him time to ponder on the extreme mystery of birds in the sky, bees in the sun, and flowers on the green hill. Teach him to sell his talents and brains. Teach him to sell his talents and brains to the highest bidder, but never to put a price tag on his heart and his soul. Let him have the courage to be impatient. Let him have the patience to be brave. Teach him to have sublime faith in himself, because then he will always have sublime faith in mankind and in God. This is the order, teacher. But see what best you can do. He is such a little nice boy, and he is my son. Now, this is a man who had all the power, but was ready. And I'm saying this because I run school. I have heard stories of parents punishing teachers for daring to scold or to attempt to punish their children. one young man, and these children will end up as spoiled brats. Because one of these spoiled brats got into a university. His father was a big man. So he wanted to chat up one young girl. He looked at her, the girl didn't look at him. Then he went back to her and said, "You don't want to talk to me? Do you know who my father is?" The girl looked at him and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You mean your mother didn't tell you?" If your mother didn't tell you who your father is, why are you asking me? But he was trying to intimidate the poor girl because his father was a minister. But he said, if your mother didn't tell you who your father is, why are you asking me? But you will find that children of ministers would like to be ministers in school. Children of senators want to behave like senators. Children of bankers want to behave like bank managers and so on. But you have to let your children understand that you've gotten to where you are, not by shortcut, but by hard work. Because very often, children think that their parents have done the difficult work for them, and all they have to do is to live up. I can tell you something. My friend Aldo said something to me once. He said that the children now, this may include some of you, and the children now, many of you sitting here, you don't go here, and the children call you people landlord. Your sons are calling you landlord because they are waiting to inherit your property. So you parents are just landlords. Finish and go, and let's take over the property. So it is important that beyond just seeking a good education, that these children have a very solid and a firm moral foundation. We know that in places like many people, when we talk of leadership, our minds go to Lee Kuan Yew, they go to church, they go to all kinds of people. But it is important to also understand that America, with all this greatness, didn't start off as great as it is. But many of us also have studied British colonialism. But please don't forget, the British people didn't just start running around here to come and colonize us. No. The British founded what is called the Royal Geographical Society. It is still alive today in 1830, the Royal Geographical Society. And that society privileges men and women up till today who love geography. So all these people, whether Mongo Park, all these people who are running around the world, they took money from the Geographical Society to go on exploration. And I'm making the point because nothing happens by accident. When the Dutch arrived in South Africa, what is now South Africa, in 1652, okay, they knew what they were looking for. By the time, for example, that the King of Belgium, Leopold, decided to take over what is now the Congo, he left over 10 million Africans with one hand. The point I'm making is, a leader must understand the nature of the resources that are available. And unfortunately for us in Nigeria, the resources that we have, we are unable to make use of them because we are focusing on ethnicity, religion, gender, and other differences. And this is why it is increasingly difficult to talk about excellence in Nigeria. So if you are thinking about a complex world to which you are going to be able to compete, then you must do more than what we are doing now. I was talking to somebody. I just finished writing a draft article yesterday about this, our daughter, Kemi Badeno, who has become the leader of the Conservative Party. I'm surprised that women politicians in Nigeria have said nothing. The Conservative Party is 190 years old this year. 190 years old. The first British woman to ever break through that concrete wall was Margaret Thatcher. She was lucky, she had a husband who was very rich. But in 1975, when she became leader of the Conservative Party, finally became Prime Minister in 1979. Since then, we know what the story is. Others have come after her. But they came under circumstances that are slightly different. Suddenly, a black woman with no visible name recognition, let me put it that way. A black woman, the daughter of an immigrant, a young girl who was born in 1980, when I was already doing a master's degree. Suddenly, she don't come past us. Now she's going to be contested for election with nobody behind her. except her sheer courage. What are Nigerians doing? Nigerians are busy criticizing and abusing the poor guy. At the age of 40, if you are 40 years in Nigeria, you feel contest to be woman leader of PDP or APC. You feel? You don't feel. Who be your husband? Who be your papa? Who they follow you behind? It's a cause for celebration, but I'm disappointed that we're not celebrating. And because we're not celebrating, it's a measure of our lack of appreciation of greatness. But I want to conclude by saying, for those of you who are the young graduates, please, I want to encourage you. Don't focus on the resources that your father has. Don't focus on the position that your father has. Focus on what God wants you to do. And so in your prayer, ask God to direct your path. Because you may finally become successful in life without your parents. You don't know. Amaka did not plan for a life like this. Ndoma and his wife did not plan for a life like this. So, but children must learn that a day might come when you'll have to stand on your own. At that point, the father may not be around, the mother may not be around. And parents must also encourage children. Help, and you have to start learning very early. One little girl, the family used to say prayer. Today, father will say, mother will say, brother will say, all of it. So this small girl, she was 4 years old. So she said, Mommy, me too, I want to pray. The mother said, okay. We don't know what she will say, but everybody, they had to just consider. They, oh God, our Father, we want to thank you for our mommy and our daddy. Oh God, I want to thank you for my sister, Chisoma. Please, my brother is going to do exam. Please, God, help him. God, please tell Chidera to stop beating me. Amen. Well, it may sound like a foolish prayer, but that is what, but at least he's beginning to learn. So let your children learn how to do their homework. Let your children begin to learn about discipline. Let them begin to learn about obedience. Because when the child says to the mother, father says do this, say why? Parents say, that's the beginning. The rebellion I'm talking about is constructing rebellion in terms of pursuit of your ambition in life. That is what your father wants, may not be what you want. So do what you are convinced about. But learn humility. Learn to be kind. Learn to pick up litter. Learn to cut grass. Learn to make friends. Learn to welcome visitors. Learn to visit orphanages. Parents, learn to take these children. Not everybody who is living, there's a British musician called Amex. I think Amex, I've forgotten. But she said one day, Annie Lennox, that's her name, yes, Annie Lennox. In 1986, I was a student in the UK, and we were doing this Bob Geldof, USA Africa. And she went on television. She said that because her parents were so rich, and her parents used to go to, what do you call this expensive shop? Harrods, to go and shop. And when she goes to Harrods, she will see children, young children. So she just assumed that every child went to Harrods to shop. She didn't know that there were people who could not enter Harrods because they couldn't afford it. Very often, that especially in these times of desperation and hunger, please try and teach your children what is happening to other children. It may be important to just take your children to Nyanya, drive around them, not to mock other people, but just to know that life is not necessarily what they think it will be. Finally, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have been likely a bit incoherent, but I hope that by just being here, I've expressed my solidarity with you. There are some of you, sometimes people prepare for leadership, sometimes people get into leadership by others calling them. There are many decent men and women who have refused to enter politics. Very often we can persuade those people. There's a story, and I will end with it. A king had an only daughter, and he wanted to give her out to marry, but it's like nobody fit. So the king said, look, the only person who will marry my daughter, I have a pool here with crocodiles inside. Anybody who can swim from here to the end, take my daughter as a wife and take some of my wealth. And she was an only child. So the men showed up. The men appeared all dressed up. They looked at the crocodile. Everybody moved back. Then suddenly everybody looked around. They saw one man swimming. Everybody was looking. The man was swimming and pushing. Finally, he got to the end. Everybody burst into applause. And so when he came out, the king said, well, now you're going to marry my daughter. But can you please tell us, what is it? See these crocodiles? It turned out that the crocodiles were actually not real crocodiles. So the man said, can you tell what is it? Why were you not afraid? He said, okay, I was just standing. Now push person me. Now, they said, now push person. Who pushed you? It turned out that his friend who pushed him knew that he was brave. But he himself didn't believe that he could swim through the crocodile. So sometimes these murky waters of politics occasionally push a friend. Because we cannot depend on politics of those who simply come almost because they want to make themselves rich. We must be able to have a system that inspires a younger generation of Nigerians. Thank you so very much, and God bless you. Good night.